Welcome to No Compromises, a peek into the mind of two old web devs who have seen some things. This is Joel.
And this is Aaron. I think it's important to look at some of our decisions or our points of views and refine them over time, especially when it comes to programming. And I want to share with you one that I've refined and then see if you agree with my before stance or the after stance.
Or neither.
Or neither, yeah.
Okay.
So I want to talk a little bit about doing an Eloquent query, and I want to retrieve some data from the database with my Eloquent query builder. But there are a number of different conditions that might be applied to that. And let's just make them simple. Let's just say there are Boolean conditions that come in somehow from the controller. So if this is true, we're going to put on maybe a different scope. If it's false, we're going to do maybe a query against a date. So there's basically ifs, and then we modify our query based off those ifs. Make sense so far?
I think so. Keep going. I'll let you know if I'm too confused.
All right. So in the past, a lot of times my brain works very linearly. And so I will say, okay, I know I want to build my query. So I'll $sign query equals my model, : query, maybe whatever I have to do query, like where data is like this or whatever. So I put that, into a variable as a query builder. I haven't retrieved the records yet.
All the stuff that never changes, right?
Yeah.
In query, yeah. Okay.
And then I'll have this is how I used to work it. So then I have a condition that comes in from the controller. Maybe it's a validated response, whatever. And it says, I want to have only ones in the future or something like that. And that's true. And so I'll do if $sign only in the future, and inside of my if loop, I'll then say query builder add on where date is greater than now or equal to now or whatever.
Okay.
And so I kind of built that with an if. I might have an else, etc. And I'll go through that process and I'll get to the very end. And then I'll say $sign results equals my fully modified query builder get. And that's how I got my results. And so I could watch through that and I could say, I see how I'm building my query. Everything's in a single scope. I've logically built up a query and now I have my results. One of the things that happened in Laravel, one of the features that I added was this ability to use the when or unless on the query builder. So basically when is when it's true, unless if it's not true.
Okay.
And I was really reluctant and resistant to use that when I first saw it. To me, it didn't make sense. I was thinking to myself, like, I already have an if statement lined up. Like I know how to do ifs. And when I want to block them out, maybe I'll just comment that if statement out instead of having to figure out like where in this big chain of commands is my when.
Okay.
And then the other thing was the when would require closure. And so I'd have to pass in the closure, and then I'd have to use other things. I have to use $sign variables. And so that's a while ago. You can probably already hear there's better ways to do that. But so when I was first approached with that, I looked at that and said, you know what? I don't like that. It seems convoluted to me. Like, I have to, instead of having like already a complex query and then ifs that I understand, I now have a when, and I have to remember that that's a Boolean thing inside. Like the first value is a Boolean condition. Yeah. And then I have to pass in a closure, and then I have to know what my scope is, and I have to pass in those things. I really didn't like that. Later on in PHP, we started getting, the single line function. What are those called?
Anonymous functions or closures? No, single line functions. The single.
You know what I'm saying? Like the closure that is short function.
This is the problem of doing JavaScript and PHP, by the way. But anyways, go on.
So we got that, and so then those became a little easier. You didn't have to use the use. If it was a simple thing, now the scope was in there. And so I became a little bit more open to using when and unless, but I still wasn't great about them. And then something in my mind shifted, and I started looking at that and saying, you know what? I actually do like this pattern using my short line function closures, because it's putting all of my logic and retrieval on one place. And therefore, I can look at this block and I know that that's the only place that there's conditions, because I've seen it before where you write all your different conditions for something and then you kind of wait, you do other stuff. And then at the very end, before we're returning our view, there's one more other condition I want to put on there. And before you know it, you have 3 conditions building your query, some other logic, and then another condition coming on there. And so when we're doing this all in those whens, people tend to get the results right away then too. They don't hold on to it in the variable because everything we need to know is already part of that chain.
Yeah, you didn't say this, but I think another nice thing about when is you can pass it two closures, right? So I think it actually reads a little bit nicer. Um, I don't know. I guess it depends on but with the if else, it's like, well, sometimes you have if, sometimes you have if else, and like that's sort of boiled down to one construct with the when.
Well, then again, like you can argue that, like, well, sometimes when has two parameters and sometimes it has
Yeah,
three. Well, what does
right.
the third one mean? Well, that's your else. So I get what you're saying, but
Yeah.
I don't know if that's
I think my objection more to the when, some of it was scoping, right? And so
mhm.
the arrow functions help with that. But then again, it's like the arrow functions only work if it's a single line, at least, right? Like there's no new version of
Yeah,
PHP that fixes that. So now it's like, oh, I gotta have like this big, because sometimes those statements maybe are a little more complicated, and I would want to break them.
hmm
I don't know. I guess with the query builder, it's always fluent, but you know what I'm saying? Like now you get into like
yeah.
code formatting things where it just doesn't, I don't like the way it looks, but I do like the API of that better. But I think I went through a similar journey as you, where it's like I was resistant and grew to like it. And now I'm okay with it. I will throw one objection on though. And I want to see
Yeah.
if you have an opinion on this. I would try really hard to stick with when. Like to me, when you start putting unless in there, now I have to like kind of like do more mental gymnastics. What do you think about that?
I mean, I think that's opinion thing again, because when is
Yeah.
already a helper that says if, so unless is the helper that says if not.
Yeah.
So it just
Yeah.
depends on your mental model. Perhaps you just think positive and I'm more of a negative thinker.
It's a glass half full. Yeah. That could very well be. Well, I just like if you it was always like well, you wouldn't always do unless because it's sort of the exception to the rule. But I get what you're saying. There are probably some business cases where using unless would be more readable than trying to shove it into a when. But that's my only objection, minor objection
Yeah.
there.
So I'm not sure if I'm definitely not saying don't use ifs and use when now all the
Yeah,
time. And
right,
like,
right.
but what I'm saying, what's interesting is take a look at how you're doing your coding. And we give this example here and then say like, should I keep doing it this way? Have I learned something new? Are all the
Hmm.
reasons why I disagree with this in the past still valid? Because code's changing, libraries are changing, all this kind of
Yeah,
stuff. And also you change as a programmer.
yeah.
So I have now figured out in a way, I would say how to more every year I logically develop a better skill of ordering things logically too as a programmer. So I think my code from a couple of years ago, great, but not as great as it is now because I've learned more about how to logically order things and my code is just smaller and simpler and clearer. And it continues on. I expect that's going to happen in the future too. And so I'll look at these things and say, like, now that I know how to create a more intelligent condition, maybe the simpler version of when actually works. Because
Hmm.
before I was creating a condition that was so abstract and so
Right.
many different ifs that like it only made sense to do it in if because there were so many different conditions. Like I didn't structure my code properly.
Right. I don't know if you can identify anything specific that like shifted your opinion on this, but I know one thing for me, I think that did is that when helper is actually a trait, right? It's like conditionable or something. And it started getting
Mhm.
used in more places too. Like so like some rules will use it and like validation rules.
Right,
And
right.
now it's eloquent too. So it's like it just sort of feels more first class and like I can do things more the same way across the application too. I think that might have also helped push me. I don't know if that was a factor for you or if it was just time with it and getting used to it.
Yeah, I think it was just time and with it, but I can see what you're saying because your argument with when versus unless was a grammar concern, really.
Yeah.
And you're saying now that we're using that grammar more often, that grammar is becoming more comfortable for me.
Yeah, absolutely.
So that's a great point.
I was doing a task around the house the other day and it involved ladders and reaching and there's always the danger of falling and like should I hire somebody to do this? But anyways, I was replacing
Because you're an old man, you're got to be scared of ladders. Oh, okay. Yeah, go ahead.
exactly. I was replacing a light bulb and it was up on the ceiling, but it was specifically above the shower, right? So there was you kind of had to like straddle the edge of the bathtub. It wasn't a
Yeah,
walk-in
yeah.
shower. But then I was just thinking, I'm like, showers are kind of where you sit and think and have ideas, and ideas are often represented as like a light bulb over
Oh,
your head. So I'm like, this is a very physical manifestation of something that happens to me all the time.
I don't know if showers are where you're supposed to sit and have ideas. I'm
Yeah.
pretty certain you're supposed to clean yourself and not waste water.
Maybe I turn the water off, Aaron. Maybe I have no. Not even just sitting there thinking, but you're like thinking because there's nothing else to do, right? Your mind runs free. So that's where I have good ideas in there.
Now that we've brought this up, it's good to remember that sometimes you can use tools like Rector to change from ifs to whens, things like that.
We can help with that and save you a bunch of time. Head over to masteringlaravel.io and schedule a call with us.